Hello, everyone. I'm George Rosca, and I want to welcome you to today's episode 180 of Say What, where we talk about the threats to our children in the public school system. However, today we will be speaking with Dr. Stefan Beam. He is a well-known parental rights warrior in Orange County, California. And I'm not going to be reading his biography today because I want you to actually hear his story. And he says it so well and so masterfully. So without any further ado, Dr. Bean, welcome to the Say What podcast.
Thank you, George. Thanks for having me this morning. I'm honored.
Dr. Bean, our audience, I think, is in for a treat here because they get to hear from an amazing man who's had a pretty rough background, so to speak. So I want them to hear it directly from you. I've heard you say your story multiple times, but please tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you? Where did you come from? A little bit about your early life, and then we'll get into your academic career.
Of course. Oftentimes as the Orange County Superintendent Schools have been asked, George, why write educational leadership? And I always answer that by saying you have to start with your experiences. And I think that for me, my why starts when I was born in Vietnam, born there during the war, of course. And then at the age of 2, I contracted polio. Because of that, my parents then abandoned me on the streets of Saigon because they couldn't care for a child. And then an orphanage brought me in and took care of me for a couple of years until the United States executed Operation Baby Lift. And this is a pretty well-known operation in which the U.S. was to partner with social services, adoption agencies, and bring over 3,000 orphans to the United States to be then either placed in foster homes or adopted, or to be adopted. So I was placed with the Beans, and it was pretty cool because the Beans, my mother had this heart and compassion for children. And that's where I learned that we must be a voice for the most vulnerable. And the most vulnerable in our society, of course, are our children. And she took in over 150 foster kids in and out of their home in my entire time with them. But these children were the most vulnerable in that they were kids with disabilities. They were abused and brought into our homes. We cared for them. When they were ready to be reunited, they were. Out of all those children, they adopted 10. My mother and father adopted 10 of us, including me about 4 years later. My dad was a teacher, and so he taught all of us that if we're going to overcome our challenges, really we got to sharpen the mind and value education. So that's kind of like the beginnings of my life. Now, one thing I want to share is that even when I was brought over on Operation Baby Lift, I remember just vividly how chaotic that day was. All these adults were trying to scramble to get these babies on the planes. All my records were mixed up and placed on the first plane out. I was placed on another plane. And the first plane took off, as it would have it. The back doors blew off and it crashed. And almost every orphan on that plane died that day. God spared my life, put me on that second plane out safely to the United States.
Wow. So you are now in the United States. Tell us a little bit about your elementary, junior high, high school experience, because I think I've heard from you in the past, you've had some pretty good teachers that really focused and channeled you towards who you are today.
Yeah, it's interesting about education. Education only works when you have really good, dedicated teachers and educators. So in my kindergarten through fifth grade experience, I was not successful at all. Often got in trouble, did very poorly in grades because at the time, the way they educated students who were English as a second language, pulled them out, had one-on-ones with them. So I was always away from my peers. And then IDEA, which is a special education law, just came into existence in the 70s. And educators are still trying to figure that out. So they thought if a child had a disability, because I had polio, which left me paralyzed from the waist down, they just pulled me out of classroom. And so I often struggled to communicate, make friends. And that was because they just didn't understand how to educate the most vulnerable child, right? But it wasn't until sixth grade. Now here's where education works. Sixth grade, I had Mr. Geisinger, and Mr. Geisinger looked at me right away after a few days, and he said, "Stefan, listen, I don't care about the fact that you're in a wheelchair. I don't care about the fact that you have broken English, that you get in trouble. But listen, you have a gift, and you have this gift of talking a lot." And he goes, "That talking a lot actually is the gift of communication. So what I want you to do is I just want you to give oral presentations this entire year. No need to read, no need to write, just give oral presentations on the things you hear and learn." And George, that act alone, it honed my communication skills to the point where I was invited to Washington, D.C. to speak in front of 15,000 people on the behalf of the disabled. And then that was only at the age of 14. So
Wow.
as you can see what a remarkable teacher does, and I'm sure you can remember a teacher whispering in your ear that would motivate you, right? That's what Mr. Geisinger did.
What a wonderful memory and influence. So you then go on to high school and tell us a little bit about your post high
Yeah.
school academic career and how that got you to this point.
Yeah, that's great. So because of that speech, oh my goodness, I remember at the end seeing the crowd of 15,000 in front of Washington Memorial, standing ovation. I'm going down through the crowd. People are like cheering me on and patting me. And that as the moment at that moment as a 14-year-old, that left a lasting impression that yes, God has given me a gift to the talent to communicate and speak on behalf of the most vulnerable that my mom really instilled in me. And from there, I got straight A's in high school, got scholarships to go to USC, University of Southern California. Um, and then from there, I got my master's degree, and then I was privileged enough to get my doctorate degree in educational leadership. I tease people, or I actually tell people that all those accomplishments that God honored me with, actually what was overshadowed by the actually me meeting Janet at USC. So Janet was funny because Janet was a first generation migrant. Her parents were from the Azores. Her parents are farmers, and she made it to USC. And I asked her out three times on dates, and she said no all three times. And and so later I would ask her, why did you say no? And she said, because I'm at USC to do two things, earn my degree and honor and know more about God. And I thought that was beautiful. So we ended up dating a few years after USC.
So after a USC experience, how did you get then into your teaching job?
Uh, so after USC, I would I would reunite with Janet at a mutual friend's wedding, and Matt had the brains to put me and Janet together at the same table. Chemistry flew that night, sparks flew. I teased Janet as I look back and I said, Janet, you made the first move that night. And she said, no, I didn't. I said, yeah, you did. And she did, by the way, just put on record, she did. And so after that, we dated for a couple of years, got married. And when we got married in 2000, her parents experienced some medical issues. So we decided to move up there for a little bit. Um, and I decided, you know what, I'm going to pursue this path that my father took. And I pursued a teaching credential while I was up there and began my teaching career in the Central Valley.
So all of that has led you then to here and back to Southern California in Orange County, and you are now the superintendent of public schools over all of Orange County as part of the Orange County Board of Education. And this is so exciting, especially since I'm also a resident of Orange County and have been fighting for parental rights for a long time. And in the past, we haven't had a friendly superintendent for parental rights. So, Dr. Bean, I'm going to dive right in to some tougher questions here
Sure.
because I'm sure our audience wants to know when someone that is a parental rights, warrior and advocate like yourself, What are your priorities now in leading such a large organization and having so much influence on what 28 local school districts? What are your top three short-term priorities?
Yeah, my short-term priorities in my first 100 days was relationship, relationship, relationship. The bottom line is any new leader coming into any organization, especially a large one like Orange County Department of Education, it was really just to get an analysis of the landscape and build relationships. Throughout my years, all through all those challenges, I know one thing. The reason why I was able to overcome a lot of that is because others built relationships with me and mentored
Mm,
me. And so, went on in the first 100 days, went on listening tours, met with every single superintendent, 28 superintendents for lunch, met with educational partners such as Protect Our Kids, met with other partners in Orange County that actually make an impact in our students' lives. We serve about 450,000 students across Orange County. So I've been in multiple meetings every single day, packed, jam packed, because I want to know about the experiences our educators and our students are having. And I want to, and I'm, one of my strengths is empathy. And that's how you learn about people is listening, speaking, bringing people together and engaging in conversation. All of that in that first 100 days informed then our strategic plan. And that's what we would consider more midterm, long term.
so are you past that 100-day period now?
Yep. We're probably in about 105 days. So we're past, yep. And I've met literally hundreds and hundreds of people. And, we have a staff of 2,200 people. And I've probably in that time met about 95% of them, either
Wow.
individually or in large gatherings and engagement gatherings.
So, after 100 days of listening tour and you're on your maybe 105th day, I gather that in 5 days you haven't necessarily surmised all of what you've heard and crafted a strategic plan, but can you give us maybe a sneak peek of some of those, you know, core things that kind of floated to the top?
Well, see, so George, I'm a multitasker. So toward the end of those 50 days, we did actually start to begin to craft a strategic plan. So we call it the 531. And some of the things that we're talking about there it is when we look at educating children, what is it that really we need to, what is the lens we need to look through to break down those barriers for all of our students? And it really is about uplifting and tailoring in an innovative way an approach to education that could support all of our kids in Orange County. So I'm tasking our Department of Education to be more innovative. So some of our innovative initiatives. One is first AI in education and in business, and we have to be in front of that because what will happen is that our kids already are using AI. So we need to teach them to use it responsibly and ethically. We ourselves need to use it responsibly and ethically, because as you know, AI can produce things that I have never said, but it will videotape me saying those things. So it's pretty scary. But if we can grasp it, understand it, bring educational partners together to get some guidelines for the county, then we can lead in that innovative way. Another one of those initiatives is we really need to up our game on funding innovative programs and practices across Orange County. Another priority is through what we call EQ leadership. Emotional intelligent leadership has been around in the business industry and health industry for decades. Why not in education? And what I mean by emotional intelligence is just really understanding people and listening to people and being empathetic with people and making decisions with parents. And that's the whole thing is like engage our parents in these educational conversations. That's where we do the learning. So those are just some of the few initiatives that we have.
Well, this third one is music to my ears because I think it's a good segue to the next question that I want to ask you. And what are you doing in your role as superintendent to foster a more positive relationship with parents in the district? Because the previous superintendent wasn't doing that. And I've had so many parents who've come up to me and expressed their frustration. And I have to admit, I don't know everything and how the department works. I've only been involved in the last 6, 7 years. But how do you see your role in fostering that collaboration with parents?
Well, the great thing about this role is doing exactly that, George, is fostering those relationships because I have so many other employees that really do amazing work and they're experts in those work. My job is just to bring them to get people together, build bridges. And so some ways that I've done that in the last 100 days is create and engage in a strong conversational and relational situation with our PTA. Fourth District PTA is in Orange County, rather large group of parents. Also, I'm contracting individuals to come in and actually start these parent and family engagement opportunities like town halls. I think it's very important that everybody is brought to the table and that we're equal at that table. Sometimes in education, as educators, because I was a principal, as a teacher, a superintendent, sometimes we become so prideful that we think we know what's better than parents. And that to me is just absolutely ludicrous. I'm a parent of four. And so my goal is to help and acknowledge our parents to understand they have an equal voice at the table of education, but they even have a larger voice as a role of parent. And so I liken to when I was growing up, can you imagine 12 kids and my parents all sitting around a table? And every night, my mom purposefully and deliberately made us a three-course meal, salad, main dish, dessert, so that we would spend a long time together talking about the day's experiences as a disabled person. I had three Black sisters, their experiences. I have two Latino brothers, their experiences, and we all came together with an equal voice and shared in those experiences. That's what we need to do in education. Bring the parents to the table and let them know they matter and they know what's best for our kids.
So, we as parents complain a lot about, the public schools and the leaders within there for not hearing our voice. But I'm sure that for you, you've always tried to engage parents, and maybe there's some frustration on your part because parents aren't getting engaged. And so I can only imagine you've been in the education industry for a long time. Can you give us some tips, parents like myself, like what are your frustrations about us because we're not getting engaged? What can we be doing as parents to get more engaged?
Yeah, it's not necessarily a frustration, but more of a barrier for parents to be engaged, and that is just knowledge, right?
Mm.
Parents need to know that this is how they get involved. They can get involved by joining a PTA. They can get involved by joining school site council. Those are councils that advise the principal and the school site. They can get involved by going to school board meetings, understanding and learning. They can get involved by actually picking up the phone and asking for a meeting with the principal. They can get involved by actually running local races. School boards are very important. With what we call local control, that means actually districts and school boards, they have good control of what educational approach exists at that district. So parents, it's even though running a campaign may seem difficult, it really isn't when you talk to people that have done it. And it is so powerful to have parent representation on local school boards.
So, Dr. Bean, I'm going to go into maybe a little bit more of a sensitive area, but as a parent, this is the stuff that I hear and from others, and it boils our blood.
Yeah.
And recently, we've been seeing a lot of news, and I think it's always been there. I mean, I've read a lot of studies on this topic, and it's always been there. But now I think it's, kids are getting smarter in the classroom. They're videotaping their teachers when teachers are doing this kind of stuff. And what we've been saying a lot in our school board meetings is for our superintendents and our boards to deal with activist teachers. Now, obviously, you have a department of, you said 2,200. I mean, that's huge. But how do you as a leader propose to work with the 28, other superintendents of those local school districts and solve this crazy problem of activist teachers within the education system? Because it's just wreaking havoc on our kids.
Yeah, to your point, because social media is a significant part of our lives, because video is a significant part of our lives, um, I think you're winning the victory. You're winning these battles because it's helping people to be informed on really what's going on, right? And I think that's the first piece is just really informing and showing, and that's what you're that's what Protect Our Kids and other organizations are doing. And I want to say this, first of all, for the most part, teachers have a genuine heart for their kids. In education, teachers, the mission should just be we impart knowledge and we teach our students to be critical thinkers, to use that knowledge in ways that will fulfill their dreams, whether it's to be a doctor, cybersecurity analyst, a nurse, or whatever it may be. That is the job of education. And so most educators know that and they want to do that. They get frustrated because they're caught in the middle of adult issues. And that's one side, one thing. And then there are those few teachers that take it upon themselves to be activists. And there are certainly moments in which an individual can display their civil rights and duties to be activists, right? But I firmly believe that is not in the classroom, just because classroom should be about instruction. Classroom should be about imparting knowledge and critical thinking. The only other times you can talk about those types of things are in humanities, in histories, social sciences. And when you do that, though, you approach it in a very agnostic way. We as educators should be presenting knowledge in a very agnostic way. And I use that meaning we shouldn't impart our own opinions unless we give the opportunity for others to share and express their opinions in the classroom. And so what I would encourage to do is parents to continue doing and supporting groups like you to be able to continue uplifting and putting spotlights in those areas so that you can then go to the channels of communicating it with principals, communicating with your board, communicating with the county, so that we can help support that principal. And I don't know if you know this, but principals have a lot of power because certainly principals make a lot of decisions on what comes and goes into that classroom, into those classes. And so organizations like Protect Our Kids should be or can work with those parents to engage in those conversations. For me at a department level, we're so far removed from the classroom, but what my job is, we can build bridges, bring people together to have these healthy conversations. Otherwise, if we don't have healthy conversations about a teacher that's being an activist, maybe that teacher is being misunderstood, but if that teacher doesn't actually sit down and talk to organization or parents, then they could run rapid. And so to your point, yes, those are the things that we can do to combat those types of things. And I don't even say combat that. What I really say is those are the types of things to steer us back to what education should be about.
And I think that's the key. As parents, we really want to send our kids to learn for that instruction. We don't need these educators to be imparting their own values upon our children. That's the parents' responsibility and right at home. Are you seeing, because this is something that I have been seeing, through my own experience of going through the public school system here in America. I mean, I'm originally from Romania, come from a family of 12. Most of my older siblings did, most or half of their schooling there. And then we came here. And so in the 90s and early 2000s, I could maybe say I had one teacher who really was pushing some of her own agenda in the classroom. But if I talk to my youngest sibling, who's 11 years younger than me, that dynamic completely changed. And the only thing that I could attribute that to is the teacher credentialing programs. What's been happening to those in the last, 15, 20 years, that the teachers that come out of these teaching programs are now so vociferous and passionate about these social justice topics. Are you seeing that those programs are starting to train more of teachers to be activists, or what is your take on this?
Well, my take on this piece is that I'm seeing teachers that come out of credentialing program with less experience or skills to teach content, okay,
Mm,
academic content. That's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing that there needs to be more emphasis on instructional delivery and approaches because let's just face it, it is unacceptable to have it's unacceptable to have 50% of, and that's in our county, 50% of our kids failing in reading and math and writing. That number is even larger in California. That number is even larger in certain districts. We have districts that in which 2/3 of our student population cannot read and write and do math at their grade level. That's unacceptable. So I try to find the root cause to things, right? And the root cause is we need to support and train our teachers to deliver very strong instruction. I remember going through a credential program in the 80s, and boy, we learned about explicit reading methodology. We learned about explicit instructional approaches to teach these content areas. We even learned about like math strategies that we could use to impart on our kids. So it's all about instructional approaches and content. I've seen less of that. And so therefore you might get a new teacher that comes in, and not only do they have to struggle and learn with classroom management or struggle and learn how to deal with all these adult issues, but now they're struggling on just merely imparting knowledge and leading kids through content. And I think that's
wow.
where the deficit is. We need to do a better job in education. We being even myself, really training teachers to be instructional leaders.
So, Dr. Bean, what you just described there for me is what we call a say what moment. And that's why we named our podcast that, is because these are truths and glimpses of kind of an insider's view of education that we couldn't quite put our fingers on. And I've understood through just some of my past research about the credentialing programs, but what you just said about teachers not being trained properly out of these programs to come in, in day one, know how to deliver the content, how to manage their classrooms. That's shocking to me. It's a huge say what moment. And so I'm hoping that as you figure out more and more of these root causes, that the Department of Education here in Orange County can maybe be a leader in bringing back that high quality of education by really focusing on training teachers properly.
If I could say this, George, just real quick, is that the path of getting your credentials, you spend 6 months in certain content areas, and then you spend 6 months as a student teacher. Let's look at a doctor, for instance. A doctor spends 4 years studying the content, and then another 4 years actually practicing the content. I'm going to say something radical, and that is our teachers actually need to spend more time learning the content and then more time doing the practice of that content. So they've got to be immersed in ways to communicate, because, our teachers, poor teachers, they're pulled all over the place. They have to sometimes be counselors because many of our kids have a lot of mental health crisis and experiences, and our teachers aren't prepared for that, nor are they prepared to handle really teaching explicit, deep reading, deep math strategies. And And the data shows it. 50% of our kids in Orange County are failing. More than that in California are failing. And so it really potentially, and this could be radical, is let's actually expand the time we train our teachers. How is it they can get the content training only in 6 months, and then practice it in 6 months? I actually think
Mm.
it needs to be a longer period.
Wow. Very, very well said. I love that insight. Dr. Bean, I'm going to take this maybe just question one step further and not just coming at this question from the parents and the activist teacher concern, but as parents, we also have a concern for our kids and their own rights within the classroom. Um, what is the, Orange County Board of Education doing to support students' rights as well? And especially, I would say, in the last few years where we're seeing, freedom of religion being attacked. How is the Board of Education dealing with this tough topic?
By actually bringing organizations in to help us solve those problems, bringing in gateways, right, for
Mm,
learning, bringing in protect our kids, we're bringing in PTA, because PTA really appreciates parents' involvement and they do it and they say they want to be more involved. Well, that's how we do it. We bring in those people to engage in conversations to come up with solutions. And I think part of the solution is just informing our educators, our teachers. I've learned from gateways that our teachers can actually teach about the Bible, teach about the gospel, and do it legally under ed code. And those are things that we need to make all educators aware of, because there are teachers that would be willing to approach. And again, teachers just should be presenting the data to their students and let the students make a decision for themselves. But if teachers feel they're locked step into only being able to present certain data and not all, that's problematic. And so we just need to inform our teachers and let them know that yes, you could actually, when you're talking about the Muslim faith, you can actually talk about Christian faith. You can talk about the gospel. That's exactly what the standards tell us to do. So is to inform, basically. That's how you combat it. Bring people together to talk about it, talk about the problems, come up with some solutions, and then inform the warriors, the people on the the front lines, which are teachers and parents and principals.
so let me take this now in a different direction. We are in a lame duck period nationally. A new administration's about, to come in January 20th with a whole different agenda. What does that mean for Orange County, for our funding in education, and maybe even for some of your strategic plan and how you want to implement it?
So are you, and I assume that you're referring to the possibility of the Department of Ed being dismantled. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, so the Department of Education originated in 79, and if the new administration that comes in is able to dismantle it, the rationale behind that is what it does is it gives more local control. All right. So what happens now is states, counties, and districts can then have more control in the way that they implement instruction, the curriculum choices they make, as well as control how they spend their money, much closer to the local level. Now, there is federal money in education, and we call that like Title One, Title Two, Title Three for English learners, for professional development or whatever it may be. What will probably happen is that money will still exist. It'll just be delivered from different departments. Like there's an Office of Civil Rights. Did you know that? An Office of
Mm,
Civil Rights at federal level, they actually may just the money may just go channel through them to then be to the states.
okay.
I also say this about funding is that districts usually only get of their entire budget, only 10% really is made up of federal money. 90% is their own district property tax, state money that comes in through what we call
Okay.
local control funding formula, LCFF. And so that I don't think is going to impact it much. Um, Now there'll be opportunities for districts to go after money now in these various departments at the federal level. Usually it was easier for them to go after that money through the Department of Ed. But if that's dismantled, the money's still there. They just have to, go out and find it in those different departments, in those different areas.
So, Dr. Bean, with this money, you said that it's potentially flowing from different sources, but really ultimately bringing about more local control. What does that mean for parents?
That's a great question. So there's actually now more opportunity for parents to be involved in the decisions of education, because if you're shifting the control more to a local level, that means those at the local level have more voice in it. So therefore, I encourage parents to then uh, be a part of the educational system locally. How do you do that? Again, you serve on the boards, school boards, or you come to those school board meetings and be a voice, or you take part in those opportunities that districts offer, like school site council, PTA, ELAC, DLAC, all of these different councils and advisory committees. If you now parents are participating in those ways, now you have stronger voice because the control is more local. And so it's a great opportunity for our families to get involved.
Well, Dr. Bean, I really appreciate that. I think just, summarizing your life story, what got you into education, how you are passionate about parental rights and getting parents involved. But I also love that you have a vision for teachers and caring about them. And with Protect Our Kids, we always say we love students, we love parents, but we love teachers. We love our administrators. We want them to be supported. And I think this is the first time I'm hearing a lot of, a lot of solutions being articulated that we're not hearing out there. And so I hope that this podcast will, amplify some of your ideas, Dr. Bean, and hopefully other superintendents from across the country are listening to this. And parents, if you know of a teacher or a principal or superintendent, I highly encourage you to share this podcast with them, because Dr. Bean has some really good insight. And the big say what moment for me, which I want to come back to again, is how teachers need to be supported in delivering content. And I never compared that to how you placed it with the medical system. 4 years of learning, 4 years of actual, practical on-hands training. And man, if you want your doctor to be good and go through something like that, how much more our teachers who actually get more time with our kids than doctors do?
That's right. That's a great analysis or analogy.
So Dr. Bean, we're going to wrap it up here, but is there anything else that you'd want to say to people out there, parents like myself, or other administrators out there who are fighting the good fight? What would you like to tell them?
You know, as I listened to your question, it made me think of a memory I had in school. So in middle and high school, went to a school that my classroom was on the second floor. So being in a wheelchair, obviously that's a challenge. So every morning I get out of the car and I roll up to the bottom of the stairs, and there I see four of my friends ready for me, and they lift me up on that wheelchair and take me up those stairs. But as the days and the months and years went on, I noticed that it wasn't just my four best friends, but it was a rotation of people, a community of people getting me up there, and helping me overcoming that barrier so that I can learn. So that's an analogy for our kids. For our kids, they are faced with so many barriers in our culture today to learn. They need not only our teachers, not only our principals, not only our community members, they need our parents also. to come alongside our kids to help them overcome those barriers. And I think that we, as a group of people that are doing this work for kids, must honor and respect our parents in that role. Our parents are the ones that understand better empathy, better love for their children, and they know what's best for their kids. So let them come and be a voice in this education community so that we can all uplift our kids. And that's really what it's about.
Well, Dr. Beam, thank you so much for making time for us. This was absolutely a pleasure to talk to you and to pick your brain. For all of our listeners on the Say What podcast, thank you for hearing or even watching us on YouTube. We ask that you continue to share content. Go on our website, pok.org. We have a lot of great information for parents. We also have a weekly expose that we share on top 3 stories that are happening around the country on parental rights. Go ahead and sign up for that expose on our website. And if you want to be a supporter of, you can also donate there. So we thank you so much for listening. Until next time on Say What.